Okay.
I'm just going to go at the back of the room, just to make sure I can hear you. It's not on. Is it on? Yeah, it's working.
Yeah, no, I'll do the housekeeping. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm a bit tall for that microphone. A little bit of sort of housekeeping. There are no planned alarms or drills today. So if an alarm sounds, it is the real thing, and you need to sort of make your way downstairs, not using the lifts. And our muster point is apparently out the front to the left under the bridge. Follow me, I'll be first, okay. As usual, I'd like to start with a few thank yous. Firstly, a big thank you to the Management Committee and Secretariat for once again delivering this great event. And a special thanks to Dinesh, to Anne and to Kevin for delivering those final finishing touches that are always so difficult. Secondly, thanks to our guest speakers and presenters who, give their time and, share their expertise and insights with us. Some have travelled from the length of the UK to be with us, and we have two speakers that have actually travelled from Europe. So thank you very much, guys. But my biggest thanks always goes to our members and their guests. Thank you for your continued participation and support. I mean, without you guys, we wouldn't be here today. So thank you very, very much. And if I may indulge myself, I'd also like to thank the Springboks and the French rugby team for producing such an exceptional rugby quarterfinal this weekend. Looking forward to Saturday, but let's not talk about that. I mean, let's, good luck, England. So much has happened, and in some instances, so much has been announced that is possibly never going to happen since we last met. We were all looking so forward to NCTS 5. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait until the 1st of July, 2024. We have our own software, so I was really looking forward to CDS exports. Unfortunately, I'm also going to have to wait until early next year. And for those that have still been delaying declarations for up to 175 days, this stops on the 31st of January. What else has happened? I mean, the border target operating model has given us 3 brand new deadlines. Do you think we're going to make them? Do you think we're going to miss them? The 1st of January sees the introduction of pre-notifications for IPAFs of all SPS goods. We're going to hear a little bit about that today. And I'm also sure I've heard that somewhere before, but let's see. The 30th of April sees risk-based checks on foodstuffs and the like at the UK frontier, and the 31st of October will see the implementing of safety and security declarations for goods moving into the UK from Europe. Apparently, in September, the Electronic Trade Documents Act came into effect. I almost missed that, and I'm still sort of trying to see what impact that new legislation is going to have on us. I understand the Exide movement and control system will be updated later this week. We've had a little bit of feedback that some parts of the service will reflect a new design, but I understand that there are parts that are going to become inoperable. We did try to get someone from HMRC to cover that today, but we were a little bit late, so I'll be looking for updates there that we'll be sort of putting onto the website for you guys. On the positive side, we have seen some increased HMRC enforcement activity, which, if correctly and effectively targeted, is very, very welcome by the membership. There have also been positives from HMRC from an engagement perspective. The Modernising Authorisations Task and Finish group that are talking to us today are moving swiftly, in the direction that we want them to. And there have been a number of calls for evidence that I hope we've all participated in. I see it was noted that the TSS contract has been extended to the end of 2024, which appears to have been welcomed by sort of one section of our membership, but vehemently opposed by others who believe that this puts commercial customs brokers at a disadvantage. So, I mean, with all that, I mean, choosing what we were going to talk about today has been quite a challenge, but I think the management committee have sort of have got that right. We can expect to hear about the border target operating model, safety and security declarations, and the end to those staged customs controls in Ireland. We've also got an update from DEFRA. We will hear about the progress being made on modernising authorisations. We will hear about why NCTS 5 was delayed and whether we can expect it to sort of meet the next timetable. We'll hear about the single trade window initiative. I mean, there's a lot of talk that is it possibly stalling at the moment. We will hear about EU reforms and these a carbon border adjustment mechanism. And at the end of that, we'll have a sort of a bit of a panel session. We haven't sort of decided on a subject as yet, but Mike will be hosting that right at the end, and we'll try and pick out what you know, is sort of most pertinent in terms of the subject matter today. So we are running a little bit later, so let me introduce our first speaker. Now, almost a regular at ACITA Nationals, Ben Fowler is going to talk to us about the border target operating model, safety and security declaration, and understand the staged customs controls for Ireland. Ben, all yours. I don't know how tall you are.
I was shorter than you, Des.
And that goes as well, okay.
Lovely, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me back. I think I've been to pretty much all of these for the last year and a half now, so it's a pleasure to be back. I like to wear different hats, so I think I've spoken about a number of different things with you all. What we were looking at covering today in this first session was a little bit about the border target operating model, what we've said, what we've done, a couple of indications of what the next steps are and the direction of travel. I've got a couple of colleagues here from the teams dealing with the end of stage customs controls for Ireland and on the safety and security front. So if anyone's got any questions, I may pass you across to them. But otherwise, I'll run you through this together to save us chopping and changing and hopefully get Des some of his time back. Am I not speaking clearly enough? Sorry. There we go. Is that better? Can everyone hear me now? Thank you. Sorry, I should have checked that. So first off, I'll give a broad general update on the actual publication itself, followed by an update on what that means for safety and security, and then the ending of stage customs controls, finishing, of course, with next steps and any opportunities for questions. Just taking a step back from the information on this slide here, the border target operating model, as you all know, is something that arose last April, in April 2022, when it was announced that we would not be proceeding with the ending of the EU customs, the EU safety and security waiver in that July, as had originally been signalled, and we would look at taking some work away, working with stakeholders such as yourselves, to look at what other options were available to us across a whole number of fields. And I know you've got DEFRA colleagues next who can talk a bit about SPS, and then within the sphere of this work, we've mentioned a little bit about modernising authorisations, who you're also hearing from shortly after us. It's been a bit of a journey to get here. As many of you are aware, the draft version of the target operating model was published in April, 5th of April, just before the Easter break, and we engaged with people for a number of weeks at that stage. We took that away. We listened to what people had said. From a safety and security perspective, certainly primarily what we needed to do was to clarify the way that we had told you things. But we have made a number of changes to the original draft product there that's helped us to shape the narrative and explain what we're trying to do and how and what that means. So what we're doing now, that's probably the end of phase one, if you will. That's the end of the part where we sort of set out initial high-level objectives, and now we're sort of moving into the more detailed elements of everything. So within this bit here, I will speak to you first off about what some of those changes look like, how that clarifies information for you. I'll explain some of the upcoming milestones and some of the policy outcomes that have been delivered there. So primarily the 4 bullet points here, and the slides are always circulated afterwards, so don't feel you need to kind of capture these if you're taking notes or anything like that. But so first off, we clarified a bit more about what we meant by the data set. There's a slide on that in a moment which I'll show you, which helpfully breaks everything down within the data fields into the sorts of whether they're mandatory, whether they're conditional, whether they're optional, etc. So we've set that out a lot more clearly because I think we weren't as clear as we could have been when we published the draft version. We've set out a lot more information about liability and responsibilities because we're aware that people had concerns around how that would operate in practice. We have worked with DEFRA, with colleagues from across the House to make sure that we can pull out all the information on transit and co-locate it within the target operating model and make that a lot clearer for you. And then we've included further detail and design on the implementation of the UK single trade window. Now you've got Claire Sheehan, who's one of the DDs from that team coming along later, and she's a wealth of knowledge, so hopefully that should be quite a useful conversation for all of you. So Des started off today by talking about milestones. So these are the ones that we've set out here. We have got some progress, which I'll cover in the next slide, I think it is. But the first and most sort of pressing deadline is we looked at bringing forward low-hanging fruit, as it were. We looked at making available rest of world facilitations that were included in the plans for the ending of the EU waiver. So there are the free facilitations. These will come into effect from the 19th of December for people making rest of world movements that are affected by those types of sort of waiver there. Then on the 31st of October 2024, then the EU waiver will end and government will implement mandatory requirements for SNS declarations for goods moving from into GB from the EU. Alongside that, however, we are looking at introducing a reduced data set, making it easier, making it less burdensome to actually produce that information. And alongside that, and I'm not from the border force side of the house, but there is the new border force system that they've built, which I'm sure many of you have seen information of in the media, that will start working with the border force side of the house to carry out their risking processes and try and make that more efficient and make the targeting better. Then onwards, beyond that point, we would look at the use of TSADs to fulfil SNS requirements for transit movements, but that is something that is constrained for the NCTS 6 release, which, as Des sort of mentioned earlier, NCTS 5 has been pushed back. A number of member states have asked for delays, and therefore I don't know what the timing of that update will be. So going through to the first thing I mentioned there, we've laid a statutory instrument, so secondary legislation within Parliament. That was laid on the 18th of September. We're still within the parliamentary process for that, which I believe, looking down at Daniela, finishes on the 19th of November, which will then give them 1 month run-in for it. That introduces the free waivers that we mentioned in the border target operating model. So one is for outbound products of sea fishing and other related products. One is for outbound free port goods, and one is for outbound transit movements. And I don't intend to read the full detail of the slide, but again, Kevin will be sending it out after the meeting itself. There's a big overwhelming slide there, and the same principle applies, but this covers a bit more information, and it's drawn from the target operating model text a bit more to explain what we mean by data fields being mandatory, conditional and optional. So I've put it in there, as I say, on the basis that you'll be able to read it at your leisure in the future, but it's quite dense text for today. So moving on to Ireland. So on the 15th of December of 2021, so going back a fair while there, we announced that there will be an extension to stage customs controls in Ireland. The border target operating model provided clarity on when that extension would end. So the extension was in effect from the 1st of January 2022 until the 31st of January 2024. That was to allow for the Windsor framework processes to proceed and to get to the position where we are now, where the agreement has been reached and that's being put into effect there. So from that, basically full customs controls previously were introduced, and yeah, there's some information there for you if necessary. There's been, with the announcement of the Windsor framework, we've made a lot of further commitments around unfettered access, so there wouldn't be on the indirect route, requirement for a declaration per se, but obviously GVMS and things would still take effect with regard to actually physically being able to move the goods. So basically, what will it look like on the 31st of January 2024? Well, you'll no longer be able to make your import customs declaration within sort of the 175-day period that applies at the moment. Full customs controls will apply to goods moving from Ireland to GB. And Northern Ireland businesses will continue to have unfettered access. There's no changes required for VAT at this stage there. So again, these are quite dense text slides, so not one that I intended to sort of read out in its entirety. But it's from a planning perspective now, it's worth considering how you're going to provide the information that is required, how you're going to submit customs declarations. Did you want to use an intermediary? Do you have an intermediary that's suitable, etc.? Did you want to do so yourselves? If you wanted to do so yourselves, obviously there's certain application steps that you would need to go through. And then for people using ports that use GVMS to have registered and so forth. Right. So in terms of where we are for next steps, we've not quite yet started our engagement plans for the ending of stage customs controls in Ireland. We're expecting that to be in the end of this month or the beginning of next month. We're running a timeline for people to make sure people are aware of the changes that are taking effect on sort of a 3 months to go onwards timeline, and we'll be increasing that engagement with the membership and others in the new year, particularly as we get more and more up to close to the point. But we'll start to see things coming out in the coming weeks. And then in December, we're updating the guidance for safety and security to reflect all the waiver changes. And then in terms of how we plan on communicating out the October deadline changes for next year, we're very much sequencing that with the work that DEFRA are doing on their SPS milestones, and looking at not getting in their way while their milestones are more pressing than ours. So we'll begin to come out to you a bit more after April of next year and communicate a bit more about readiness there. But obviously if there's pressing things that people are particularly anxious about, we can do that. I'm conscious whether there's any questions on that side of the work. I've gone through things relatively quickly, but if anyone does have any sort of clarificatory...
And if there are questions, please, can we put your hand up and we'll speak into the microphone so that we can get it on the recording. Does anyone have any questions?
I feel we've...
From me, if I could ask, I mean, we're talking about support. Will there be support through TSS for this, or...?
Do you want to segue to you, Dan?
So on indirect movements from Northern Ireland into the Republic of Ireland to GB, there will be TSS support. From Ireland into GB, it would be sort of appointing a customs intermediary. There wouldn't be sort of TSS support on like Ireland to GB. And
as a free service, still not?
On the indirect route, yeah. So NI to GB via Ireland, yeah, still be free at the point of use with TSS.
Okay. And then this 31st of December, stage customs controls stop.
That was, sorry, the 31st of December was the 2022 deadline. Prior to that, we announced that wouldn't apply for Northern Ireland movements. The deadline for Northern Ireland is the 31st.
No, but I'm saying the stage customs controls are stopping on the 31st of January
2024.
Yeah. Now, does that mean that I can still, if I bring a consignment in the 31st of January, I only have to put my declaration in sometime in July? Or does it mean that delayed declarations stop then and there?
This is a live issue at the moment, and yeah, we're happy to. I don't know how the process is, but we can definitely revert on that with full guidance, because yeah, this is sort of in discussion at the moment. So I don't want to misspeak on behalf of other colleagues, so I can definitely come back to you if that's okay.
Okay. Anyone have any questions? Come on, guys. Okay.
Sorry.
Is that you done? Okay. We've got an extra 20 minutes to play with here, and I'm not really sure if I prepared the music for the song that I'm going to have to... that I'm going to have to sing now. If we could go a little bit, maybe just safety and security declarations. I mean, a question that I've been asked on a couple of occasions is it going to end up the same as the rest of the world safety and security declarations? Have there been, engagement with the software service providers that this is going to be part of your normal import declaration, or is the sort of GVMS inventory that works on European originating goods going to make it more complex?
I mean, I think the challenge that we have here is that a large amount of the facilitation work that we had described in the target operator model falls within the single trade window sphere. And Claire will be presenting to you later on today around that. At this stage, we don't have the clarity on exactly the staging for anything to do with single trade window beyond 2025. Obviously, we're in a sphere at the moment where there is potential movement around that sort of area and things as well. So, the aim from the border target operator model was all very much around data simplification, was around using data more sensibly and so forth. And a lot of that situation sits within that. Now, with your members, I'm sure, have a better, clearer view than I of the direction of travel they think they may feel that would take in. Certainly with, for example, exports, there's already alignment that there's not in imports due to the timing of the requirement to provide that information. And therefore, I think what we would find is potentially some software providers may provide solutions that help people do that, depending on how they collect the information, from whom they collect the information. And one of the things that obviously we unpacked a lot within the model, and I mentioned earlier around the information on liability and things like that, is who owns what information, when do they own it, when do they provide it, when do they have it. I imagine that there'll be, one of two things could happen. The single trade window could provide some of that information, or it may well be that the private sector sees a gap that they can help people to do that more efficiently themselves by capturing the information. I think that sort of element of things is almost as much as a question for the membership as to how they feel about that. And from our perspective,
there is a concern there. So we do have a lot of members that are sort of software providers, and basically, if we look, and this is a question that maybe should be coming in this sort of single trade window section, is we don't really see where the software service providers are going to plug in. If you look at these sort of diagrams that are constantly, sort of produced, it looks as if we, as software service providers, are almost being left out of the.
I know from the single trade window, certainly they're looking at working closely with industry and co-design, and they've been speaking to CSPs and things like that as well. I'm not within that side of the house myself, so I can't speak on their behalf, but I'm sure Claire will cover that off later, or Tanya, if Tanya's able to come down. I think it's certainly from our perspective, we took the time within the engagement process to have a specific HMRC owned and run CSP and software provider session. We worked through Pat Holohan and his team to speak very regularly with CSPs and software developers more regularly. Certainly we have, so the software supplier side of things is more represented on J3C than the CSPs individually, but certainly we have that engagement, we have those channels open. We do have sort of active dialogues with that group of stakeholders. I think it's potentially a challenge around how that would work in practice in terms of software submission, because obviously we have the systems that are in place now that deal with rest of the world and so forth, and I'm afraid I'm not overly afraid. I don't know, Daniela, if you have an opinion, but whether on the way that rest of world movements, the safety and security interaction occurs with the declaration software and so forth, or whether it's held separately and how that's managed there. I profess to be more on the engagement side than on the technical side on that front, but certainly we are speaking to people. We have thought out to have specific specific HMRC-led sessions to give people a voice in the process during the TOM. We had, I think it was the fifth of the 5 sessions was dedicated to that population. So we've tried to do what we can, and intrigued if people have heard problems. Obviously, then it's useful for us to hear that directly from you guys, because this is a useful forum to get that sort of information back from. If you feel that there's more engagement needed and things like that, then we can take that away for sure.
Yeah, I think the engagement has been great, and I mean the feedback we've got back on the engagement has really been positive. But it feels as if it's almost a one-step process. That you guys are listening to us, we're all talking to you, and there's no sort of second bite at the cherry. There's no sort of how you interpret that engagement.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at it. Are we in agreement on the way forward? That doesn't seem to happen.
So, I mean, what we have had at the moment is we are currently in the process of moving into the next phase of work beyond the target operating model. So the target operating model was a cabinet office-led piece of work. It was much bigger than just us, as you can imagine by the fact we've got DEFRA colleagues and others here, all of whom were affected by the target operating model. It was very much a collegiate process. When we're looking at things like data fields and things like that, the interaction with GVMS, all these various other things, there will be further engagement along the line. There are other opportunities to have a conversation about things. I think the criticism we've heard of the target operating model is that it's too high level and strategic, but I would turn that around and say it is high level and strategic because we're quite clear throughout that process that there would be further technical information coming out later. There would be additional steps taken. There would be engagement with particularly affected stakeholder groups. So I don't think I wouldn't say that the target operating model was literally that line in the sand. That was more sketching out a piece of strategic work, and it's not got that level of detail that we would expect people to be able to implement off the back of. Should we put it that way? It's not guidance. It's not a manual. It's not anything like that. It's not when we have the guidance and things like that, we test that through our guidance task group. Which members of J3C, the Joint Customs Consultative Committee, of which Des is one, we have those relationships, so that there is further opportunities to input into how we communicate it. There's opportunities to what we do. It's very much an ongoing process. It is just that is a big ticket item. That's the sort of the ministerial fanfare. That's the Baroness Neville Rolfe speaking to people rather than the minutiae of you and I having a conversation about what it means for the members.
I suppose the concern that we've also had coming through from a lot of the members was there's all that engagement all at once. And, we look at it sort of simplifying, declaration procedures and so on. I had sort of so much feedback that people didn't have enough time to actually sort of get in what they wanted to get because there was all this engagement and everything happening at the same time. Is there another bite at the cherry for industry or not?
I mean, again, with the granular detail, then the ongoing sort of delivery into design, design into delivery into implementation phases are still yet to come. We're talking about October next year for the data set reductions. The single trade window is an ongoing programme. I think they've had their strategic release 1. They're talking about their strategic release 2. There's there's sandbox environments and things like that. The NCTS 5 programme has got its sandbox environment. We do that sort of engagement with industry now when it comes to making things available. We wouldn't just say we're going to release something on the 31st of October 2024 and that will be the system that you'll have to use. That process and everything else is being on. I mean, and Danielle, I don't know if you have anything you'd want to add to that particularly, but sorry.
Yeah, so we, as Ben said, we're kind of moving into the delivery of the SNS model now. So when Ben's been talking about kind of the broader engagement starting from April next year, we have started to do the kind of beginning bits of engagement for delivery. We've spoken to software developers and CSPs. I think when we're looking at the data set, the intention that we had was that if people are currently importing for rest of the world and have processes set up and they're well established, they don't want to change them, then we don't want to force changes to be made. You can carry on doing that. But then there is a slight difference with kind of software developers and those who are providing that service would be looking to provide that service for EU importers, because obviously to take advantage of the reduced data set, they need to kind of make sure that their systems work. So yeah, we're starting that engagement now, kind of looking at kind of when to bring people in, because what we don't want to do is kind of keep coming and just talking at a high level. People have heard a lot from us on the TOM, so we want to wait until we have things to actually engage people on. And I think kind of the policy, kind of the data set as it is set, but kind of looking at concerns around implementation or how we do that and how we work with the sector is still very much an ongoing discussion. But yeah, we just want to make sure that we're doing that at the right times. And again, as Ben was saying, we'll publish guidance for when the big changes come in, but we'll be working in advance of that to update the technical specs and things like the conditional fields in particular, making sure that it is really clear about what those conditions are, you know, when you do and don't have to provide that information, so that people have time to prepare and make sure that, you know, if they've got processes that they will still work, and if they don't have processes, they know exactly what they need to do.
And is that digital capacity available? I mean, we saw CDS for imports sort of be extended. For exports is being extended. We only sort of get in there sort of next year. Is the digital capacity available on the safety and security, or are we going to end up in a sort of a similar wait and see and delay type situation?
I mean, never say never, but I mean, so certainly things are on track now. We've got teams in place. We're moving into delivery now, and the current timescales, we're kind of hoping to have quite a long testing window internally, but then also to have that sandbox and testing externally. So as it stands, we're very much on track for October 2024. But yeah.
And is it sort of just excuse the ignorance here, I understand how it's going to work on the inventory side, but has that been plugged into sort of the pre-notification on the GVMS side?
That's still something that we're discussing at the moment, and as Ben said, I think kind of the interactions between STW and how that links all the services up is something that we still need to work through. At present, SNS declarations, if they have been made, can be included in GVMS, but it's not mandatory, and we're not. We are still discussing at the moment whether we keep it as optional or whether it does become mandatory. So that is a bit of a live discussion. And yeah, kind of one that more information will come out on as we work through that. And kind of if we get to a point where we just, well, I suppose either way, whether it's going to stay optional or mandated, something that we would look to engage on just to make sure that people know exactly what's expected of them and how it will work.
And is a lot of this being driven by pressure from the European Union? I mean, we have seen that the Irish customs, for example, seem to be a little more difficult lately in the way, you know, they were quite cooperative to start immediately post-Brexit, but that relationship seems to be becoming slightly more tense. Is that what is driving this sort of need for safety and security? Is it a European Union force, or is it really part of our timetable? Mm-hmm.
So it's something that we have for rest of world imports, and something that we should have had in place when we left the EU. Obviously, we had the waiver in place that was supposed to end several times previously, but kind of at the point where we decided to delay last year, that was so that we could simplify processes. So it's introducing a new burden, but just introducing less of a burden. But it's something we would have always had to have done. And I think from the SNS perspective specifically, we haven't really seen too much pressure from the EU. I think obviously the longer the waiver goes on, it becomes more challenging. But yeah, I mean, it's something that we're doing because it's something that we need to do as part of our WCO kind of obligations as much as anything else.
I knew if I did the intro, someone else would sing. Please, Lorenzo.
I'm not going to sing. Christ, everyone will run out. This is a sort of general comment, and it's really about almost initiative overload. I go back to the very beginning of the CDS project, where we had really good engagement, but it wasn't, and at the time I was in the software industry, but it wasn't just with the software provider. We had sessions where proper importers and exporters, the CSPs, the software providers, HMRC, we spent, you know, a good day talking through the issues that the industry was going to face with CDS, and that was great. We're now, I think, in a position where we have a number of different projects and processes. We've got target operating model, we've got single trade window, we've got ecosystem of trust, we've got modernisation of authorisations. All of this is there, but we don't, from my perspective, and it may be that I'm old and I can't see it, but we don't seem to have a single vision of what we, the trade, are going to have to be dealing with certain periods of time over the next 5 years, and it feels like, and I'm sure there's like swans on the water. There's a lot of activity under the surface, but it feels from the outside like there isn't a direct link that we can see. Because from my perspective, something like a single trade window should be. What it shouldn't be is badging up what you do with the tariff online as being part of single trade window. That isn't what it is. Single trade window should be, you tell us what data you need for everything at the border. We give you that data, and then you divvy it up however you need to. So the link between safety and security and customs declarations has to be made now for single trade window, rather than looking at, right, we've got all these different dates coming in, and I don't think we really understand how everything is going to knit together. And it would be absolutely fantastic if we had that sort of overall vision provided to us, and B, those types of very mixed sessions with people from HMRC who know what they're talking about. I'm not saying you don't know what you're talking about, but the various elements of it, but also software, CSPs, traders, both big and small, so that we can just talk about, well, what is this actually going to look like? What's it going to smell and feel like? Because that's important for us to make plans going forward.
And thanks, Lorenzo. I think our paths crossed on the self-assessment working group many years ago with Diane Evans.
That's probably
I remember well the.
I don't look that old, do I? That's the key.
Do I look that old? That's the question. But no, I think that was an example of where we pulled together industry. We talked about things. We had a lot of different models from testing opportunities available and so forth. And I think that was an example.
But even with self-assessment, that has effectively gone nowhere. In reality, with the self-assessment model, I remember sitting in a room with bright young things from the Cabinet Office and/or Treasury Customs Policy, and their key objective was, we cannot rehash something, because one of the options for self-assessment was you use CFSP, SCDP, as a basis to get it in quickly. You could do that for self-assessment, but what they came back with was, oh, no, we need to have something new for the minister. So it wasn't about what can we deliver to trade, it was about how can we make the minister feel good so that they can stand up in Parliament and look like Billy Bit anyway. So,
I mean, what I suppose all I would say in response to that, and I'm conscious that having initially finished early, we're running quite late, and that's not a very good excuse. But what we have tried to do with the border target operator model is take that step backwards out of the HMRC delivery focus. We're having a very granular, very siloed conversation with you about self-assessment, and create a cross-Whitehall working group that is dealing with the work that Andrew and Tom are going to talk to you about next, dealing with, so from the DEFRA perspective, dealing with the HMRC perspective, bringing Border Force in, having all of those in one place and having co-design. And I think what I'm hearing from that is that it's not feeling like we're doing that at a high enough strategic level, but simultaneously, as Des sort of mentioned directly beforehand, we're also feeling like we're coming to you with quite a lot of different things that are all happening and are overwhelming a little bit and things like that. And I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to square that circle and try to say, yes, we do want to come out to you with strategic things, but we've got the border target operating model was supposed to be a product that brought together a number of different things strategically and put them under one banner and allowed us to communicate to you in one form, rather than saying in parallel 4 different departments are going to come out to you and talk to you about different things. So as an attempt to do that, I think it's the first time that we have tried to start properly rolling out that methodology as a post-Brexit approach to the way that we do border policy. And so I think, we haven't got it as right as we could have done. I think there have been things like there's been long delays, there's been short engagement periods where we've said to you, we need to speak to you urgently. And then we've gone away for 5 months and we've not said anything back to you. And, I can understand how that feels as a stakeholder to have that kind of hurry up and wait type methodology. I don't think that's worked as well as it could have done, to be frank. But I do think that we have tried to show a commitment to working collegiately. We speak a lot of times, Tom and I speak quite regularly on the HMRC, DEFRA type interactions and so forth. We are putting those processes in place. I think what happened was we had a long period of time where customs was very much not a high priority ministerial interest, like you say. 2016 hit, and suddenly we were brought to the forefront. And so we had to educate a lot of people within the civil service about what you guys do, what actually it looks like to be a customs intermediary, what it looks like to work in international trade, because it was something that was sort of the Commission's policy and a very limited number of people teaching. So we have gone through that process. The border target operating model is the first step, I think, in the newer way of doing things, that higher level cabinet office coordination, individual departments speaking coherently within that narrative. But I don't think yet, I agree completely, we don't quite have anything that articulates what that strategy is on the macro level for the period of time that you guys need, the 5 years. And I think that is something that is coming. I think it is something that we have, we have readiness people at Cabinet Office. We have all sorts of people all over the shop who are all bringing that work together. But I still don't think we've done that at the same time as being conscious, as Des said in his first slide, about a number of new deadlines coming up and what the next 18 months to 2 years looks like and how congested that is. We don't have that single piece that overlays it. The border target operating model was supposed to do that. The border operating model, for the BOM, as everyone calls it, which is a terrible name for anything in trade, but that was designed to properly articulate the totality of customs in a glossy brochure that people who had never interacted with customs or heard of customs was. That was quite a good product that came out in the run-up to the end of stage customs controls at the end of 2021. We are developing, but we are moving from being geared towards the Commission deciding policy, with us having an input, towards us standing alone and having multiple machinery of government issues around 30 something more organisations at the border, X number of departments with their different non-departmental public bodies being responsible for different things and so forth. And I think we're getting there, but I agree that we haven't got there yet, and we're trying to make that process as smooth as possible. One more call. There you go. We've gone from being too short for you to now being interesting.
Hello, I just wanted to ask Miles of Alton Fund Consultancy. Just wanted to ask a question as to how maybe people in the audience as well have got a feel for it, how the internal market scheme's going in terms of trusted trader agreement, and why on earth you didn't just take authorised economic operator and say, there's your trusted trader scheme.
I'll let Dan take that.
Apologies, what was the first part of that question? Sorry, I was just walking.
To become if you're a carrier going into Northern Ireland, you have to become a trusted trader through the internal market scheme. Yeah, and we already had a trusted trader scheme called authorised economic operator, and we've found this in Freeport work as well, so that because AEO relates to a legal entity and it relates to all locations of an legal entity, for some reason that isn't seen to be adaptable to providing carriers with an authorisation. So people have to go through a lot of work to reapply to become a trusted trader. And I was just wondering how it's going and what feedback has been received. Maybe Des, you might have some feedback on it.
Do you want Des to go first? Sorry, on the
Possibly,
feedback.
yeah, Des, I don't know.
Sorry. Have you had any feedback, Des? Or?
Not really. I mean, it's been quite mixed. I'm looking for a microphone. It's actually been quite mixed. I mean, the feedback I've had is that... Hello? There we go. The feedback we've had is a lot of people think that a tiered trusted trader program would be preferable to AEO. AEO being sort of an international standard as such. A lot of people sort of on the same page as you, Miles, and believe that AEO is the way we should be going. We should have a single type authorization. But there's definitely a camp that feels a tiered trusted trader. You have industries that are very, very specific, and AEO is sort of too broad. So a more industry specific, where you can sort of almost the way that the modernising authorizations is going at the moment. That you can sort of opt in and opt out of the authorizations right the way through. But it's like everything else at the moment, sort of almost politically, it's very, very polarized. There are definitely two sides. So no, one thought in that regard.
That's really helpful, thanks. Yeah, genuinely, I haven't heard sort of such strong negative sort of views, but I mean, this is a really good forum, so I'd appreciate you raising those, and I'd be happy to sort of receive any of the specifics of that, because I think important for us internally to kick this around and sort of get to a good position. But yeah, broadly speaking, it's been quite sort of positive from my experience, and that's not to sort of dismiss your experience at all, because fully appreciate you're the experts on that. But no, sorry, I couldn't be more helpful. I genuinely haven't had that sort of negative opinion.
Just to add to that, we do, as Des said on the agenda, the team that are dealing with modernising authorisations within HMRC is here to present after the coffee break. So they can hopefully set out some of the ways that we're actually trying to streamline that process and make it better and simpler and use information more intelligently as well. Because we hear things about AEO and various other things that are positive and negative, as Des has said. So yeah, we can hopefully my colleagues who are looking at me from over there can speak to you after coffee.
Daddy will sort out all the problems, don't worry. Last question on the subject, Rocky.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. So you mentioned that there is a system that is coming, and we may have seen that in the media from the Border Force that is dealing with the Border Force aspect of safety and security. We seem to be moving away from the single trade window. The idea was that we submit once and then we don't necessarily have to keep on resubmitting. Now, that's me making an assumption. How would we, ACITA, be able to get more information on that and not pick up information from media?
Yes, I mean, in terms of the actual system itself, there's a lot of media coverage. I think they went out to, IBM did it in the end. IBM did it. There's been a lot of press coverage in that sort of industry trade. It's important to stress that there is a difference between providing information to HMRC and having to provide it again to Border Force, which I don't think is an incorrect interpretation. There is a data sharing set of information that goes across to Border Force, which they then carry out their risking. So that wasn't intended to cover anything about you being required to do new processes. It was talking about more efficiency and accuracy in the way that Border Force use the information that we are already giving them. So we're not talking about requiring people to engage with multiple people in the same way. We're just simply talking about improved risk and getting it right, not stopping things. The ultimate goal of customs is to stop the things that are nasty and not to impede free movement of trade where there is no issue.
So just to understand for our members, we do not need to do any further processes, and this is something that will be dealt with within HMRC and Border Force, and no further data would be required.
That's correct. We're just talking about having the information that is coming in, and obviously with EU movements and things like that, there's an upscaling of capacity required and so forth. The way that is being dealt with and the way that we're trying, that government as a whole is trying to improve the way that it handles data and gets that security risking right is being changed. That does not affect anybody in this room in the processes they're required to undertake.
Thank you. And is there any ramification of that particular processes on authorization project or trusted trader or anything like that?
None that I'm aware. It's just that we have HMRC and Border Force have different priorities, and therefore, Border Force is responsible for its own risking and its own carrying out of work in certain ways, and we're responsible for other pieces of work. We purely made a passing observation that they have upgraded their capacity. We did not intend to imply that anything had changed from the perspective of what we're asking you to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought I was going to be very short.
Just put a practical note to that. My understanding of it is that the GB Safety and Security will send data to the new Home Office or the UK Border Force system. So that's why there will be no immediate trade direct interaction, because the safety and security messages will be passed over to the Border Force teams.
That's right. Sorry, that's a much more succinct way of saying it. I shouldn't probably have undermined my skill set here. We've gone from being very, very short to being 5 minutes over. So,
Ben, thank you very, very much. I mean, as usual, great informative. Thanks, guys. If I could just pick up on something you said there, Ben. I have been fortunate or unfortunate to work with customs all over the world, in Africa, in the Middle East, in the Far East. And the level of engagement we have from you guys is absolutely brilliant. I mean, we don't always get what we want, but you guys are very, very approachable. I think it's something that works extremely well with customs, with DEFRA, with everyone except Border Force. It seems to work quite well. So thank you very, very much. Let me get back to where I was. Sorry, I'm a little bit lost today. I mean, next we have a DEFRA chatting to us about I'm not really sure what you guys are going to chat to us about, but over to you. If you don't know which one you prefer.
Yeah, happy with this one.
Okay.
Morning, everyone.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to say, hang on, can I skip to the next slide? Here we go. So, morning, everyone, and thanks, ACITA, for inviting us in DEFRA along to join the conference today. I'm Tom Samuel. I lead the communications and engagement team in the biosecurity borders and trade program at DEFRA, and we lead on sort of SPS controls for the border target operator model specifically and the implementation of those. So today we'll be giving you a high-level presentation on the new SPS import controls that have been set out in the border target operator model, and then we'll take some follow-up questions, but I think it's important to set out that me and Angela, we're not subject matter experts in all matters of SPS. There's a lot of niche parts of the SPS regime, but we will do our best, and where we can't get to them, we have someone to take some notes, and with the help of ACITA, we'll get some follow-ups out to you. I think it's important to set out at the start. Moving on to the first slide. So there are a few key elements of the border target operating model, the first of which are, I think we've changed the slide. There we go, perfect. So in late August this year, the UK government published the border target operating model, where we set out our new approach to SPS controls at the border. The final target operating model was developed after extensive engagement, as HMRC pointed out, those sort of 6 weeks of trader engagement in April, where we tried to get across the broad gamut of SPS traders and also involve other countries, other nations that sort of send goods our way. After that period, we then obviously went back, reflected on some of that feedback that we heard, and published the final target operating model at the end of August this year. The main reason for taking that consideration period was to focus on our main objective of minimising trader burdens where possible, but also maintaining the UK's high biosecurity standards and aligning with international WTO regulations and standards as well. So it's that balancing of sort of government protection of biosecurity standards in the UK, the food supply chain, and then also minimising those trader burdens at the border where possible. And that's our key reason for being as a programme, really. There have been some changes from the sort of draft to the final target operating model, and hopefully they're quite succinctly set out in the document itself, but it is about 170 pages long, so I don't expect anyone to sort of understand it wholeheartedly. So we're going to set out a few of those today. Firstly, the target operating model introduces a new risk-based approach to border controls, and this hasn't changed from the draft. So we've introduced new risk categories for commodities, and we've risk assessed countries around the world that send SPS goods our way, or most of them. So we've categorised into high, medium and low risk commodities, and that's based on the risk of the country of origin of the goods, and then also the risk of the commodity itself. So obviously different commodities have different risk levels depending on where they end up in the food supply chain or in the country, and different countries have different disease outbreaks at different times. So it's a very dynamic risk assessment, but we do expect it to sort of remain stable as is at the moment, and any changes to that risk model over time will give traders some implementation time. However, we do, in the sort of emergence of a emergency pest or disease within a country, we do retain the right to implement SPS controls in shorter timeframes than that too. The second bit in the target operator model that sort of remains the same is the simplified and digitised health certificates. The aim of this is we did have export health certificates before, when countries sending SPS goods to us had to use SPS certificates. We can now, as a result of Brexit, change those those EHCs and those phytosanitary certificates and make them easier for people to fill in, understand and send to us. The second part of it is the digitisation of health certificates. It's a big, ambitious project. It will take time, but we are working with countries, particularly the EU, who use the traces system, where we can en bloc get sort of big bang for our buck in terms of digitising those interactions between export health certificates. On the phytosanitary side of things, ePhyto, a sort of international digitised scheme of phytosanitary certificates, does make that easier. So the rollout of ePhyto will be a lot faster than the sort of export health certificate version of that. And lastly, the trusted trader scheme. So it was obviously mentioned about trusted trader schemes earlier, and we did look at AEO as a sort of solution for this, but it doesn't provide those biosecurity assurances as a scheme that we need for our trusted trader imports on the SPS side. So Angela will talk a bit more about that in a second. I'll move on to the components of an SPS regime. Many of you may know this, and it could be teaching you to suck eggs, but I do want to sort of set them out because it is important, and it sets out the sort of timeline that we'll see next. So the first port of call is the pre-notification, and this supports actions at the point of entry. It allows officials to target activities on different shipments that pose higher risks. It allows us as a government to trace products back to where they've come from and their point of entry, and the company and the business that sent those goods over, and where we can really target those sort of pests and diseases and make sure that we can implement controls effectively. And it also allows us to respond to outbreaks or emerging disease threats too, which will then be sort of fed into the wider risk assessment. The next aspect is health certification. So this gives us the assurance it's authorised by officials in the exporting country, and they certify that the goods are safe and produced to a certain standard. So official vets and plant health and seed inspectors in other countries send those certificates over, hopefully electronically at some point, and they provide us with assurances that this consignment and that commodity is at a required standard. And lastly, the physical inspections. So these usually occur at a border control post, some of which are being built and have been built, and they allow health officials to check goods that match the health certificate that we have, and identify any trends of concerns of sort of non-compliance of some bad actors at the border, and also to sample goods for pest and disease, and where needed, send away for further sort of lab sampling as well. So they're the sort of three main components. What's changed? So the main thing that has changed from the draft border target operating model is the timeline. And for us, this is quite set in stone. I know Des said at the start that it may shift, but we are very much on track for delivering this. And as you can see, we don't have long left. So we don't expect any material changes in these deadlines whatsoever. We'll go through the first deadline then. So as planned, we're still planning to bring in, from the 31st of January, export health certificates for medium risk goods. Then we've moved what was the January deadline out to April, and this is when we bring in border checks on those SPS goods. And then we have shifted the final date, which is the implementation of SPS controls on the west coast out to no earlier than the 31st of October 2024. And that date we're still working with devolved governments, because biosecurity is a devolved issue, to make to give trade more clarity on that 31st of October deadline. It's obviously a from at the moment, so it's a bit loose in terms of the actual time when it's going to be implemented. Let's go through this in a bit more detail. So in 31st of January 2024, and it is the 31st of January, it's not the 1st of Feb, the new controls for rest of world won't be coming in. So rest of world will stay as is. However, the EU and EFTA exports will start to align with the global import model. Export health certificates will be required for EU and EFTA exports of medium risk animal products and high risk food not of animal origin to GB. So it's all about knowing that risk of your commodity, and we're working with traders to make sure that they understand this as much as possible, and that risk level will inform what controls are applicable. Next, phytosanitary certificates will be required to export medium risk plants and plant products from the EU, Liechtenstein and Switzerland to GB. island origin and non-qualifying Northern Ireland origin, low and medium risk animal products and high risk food not of animal origin, and medium risk plants and plant products will require pre-notification on IPAFs. And this is something that hasn't been in place before. So the pre-notification on IPAFs, there's been a waiver on those goods of Irish and Northern Irish non-qualifying goods. That will come to an end. And so IPAF's pre-notification for other goods is in place at the moment. We know across the board that trade aren't necessarily doing this, but we will be reiterating that message at all of our engagements, making sure that we try and up that number of IPAS pre-notifications, because at some point it will become a vital part of that SPS regime that I set out earlier. And without it, goods may not make it into the country. So it's a sort of important compliance element. And lastly, the Trusted Trader Scheme pilots for medium risk animal products, specifically focused on the certification logistics pilots, will also begin. And that's more around the sort of consolidation hubs in the EU and the ability to move those goods without recertification. On to the next one then. So 30th of April, again, it's the 30th of April, not the 1st of May. So this is when the rest of world imports begin to align with the border target operator model. We start to see some real benefits for rest of world trade. So, for example, low-risk animal products will no longer require export health certificates. So this is a real sort of benefit for those countries sending those goods over to us. The Trusted Trader Scheme pilots for medium-risk animal products that have now focused on checks away from the border will begin, and so we'll start to pilot some of those. I think applications received. Businesses to go through that now and work out how we can have those assurances to move those checks away from the border. And then in terms of the introduction of checks at the border, EU and EFTA countries, the second phase of import controls will be introduced. So risk-based documentary identity and physical checks will start to take place at the GB border control posts for EU and EFTA medium risk animal products and high risk food not of animal origin. And for animal products, the percentage will be 100% documentary checks and 1 to 30% ID and physical checks at the border. Risk-based documentary checks, physical and ID checks, will also start to take place at control points for medium-risk plants and plant products, as well as border control posts. So that's a sort of facilitation that if you import plants and plant products, you can move those checks to control points inland rather than at border control posts. And some traders have already started to do that. And then lastly, inspection of high-risk plants and plant products will move from destination. So at the moment, there's a place of destination scheme, PODs as they're known, that will come to an end. And so we will be moving those checks to border control posts unless you've gone through the process of becoming a control point. That's the 30th of April. Lastly, as I said earlier, so from the 31st of October, we will see a few changes, and it's the SPS documentary, physical and identity checks on those West Coast movements, so from the island of Ireland and non-qualifying Northern Irish goods will be introduced on the West Coast, but that date is to be confirmed. We've committed to autumn 2023. It's a bit vague, but we will be publishing it shortly, I'm sure, and it's that work with devolved governments that's ongoing at the moment. And finally, for live animal checks, so this is something I haven't mentioned at the moment, but we are working on live animal infrastructure at border control posts across the UK at the moment. They're checked at place of destination, similar to the plants and plant products. But at some point in 2024, when infrastructure readiness allows, we will be moving those checks of live animals to the border as well, just to provide those biosecurity assurances. I'll pass over to Angela now, who's going to finish off the rest of it, but we do have time for questions at the end.
Thanks, everyone. I'm Angela Derbyshire, and I work alongside Tom on strat engagement and some of the internal communications across government with BBTP. So, as well, I'll move on slides. So, Tom's just gone through the changes in terms of the timeline, and there was a lot more detail also added into the border target operating model, covering all these different categories. Now, we're not going to go into all of these. I'll just pick up a couple. But like Tom said earlier, and I'll just mention again, if you have a look at the border target operating model, they will cover these key areas and the detail associated with that. We can answer questions where possible at the end on any of these topics if you are interested in any further information. But if not, a little bit of bedtime reading is really helpful on some of these. So moving on then, I'm going to start off by picking up Trusted Trader. So when the draft TOM was published, there were two Trusted Trader schemes outlined, and following feedback after that publication, we've now combined these two schemes into the Accredited Trusted Trader scheme and into a singular modular framework. What ATTS will provide businesses with is a flexibility of choice, which was mentioned a little bit earlier, as how they actually engage with the Trusted Trader scheme. So in January this year, there'll be a pilot, certification logistics pilot, sorry about that. We'll then move on to the second module, which is checks away from the border pilot in April 24. And alongside this, we'll be running the journey assurance pilot. And each pilot will determine if the module will be included indefinitely or not. So we are listening to people's feedback, and we're still taking that feedback into consideration as to how these modules will be run. You will be aware that we have recently launched an expression of interest for trade to take part in the pilots. So if you haven't been in touch, please look out for that. I think the timeline's probably just come to an end or just about to come to an end, but it's essential that businesses and trade do get involved. So if you do have an interest in what these pilots will include, please reach out to us and we'll link you up to the relevant team. So the second area I'm just going to cover off. There's a lot of text on that slide, but like I said, we'll probably share these slides for you. It's around groupage. So groupage really involves transporting multiple products in a single lorry or a container. And the models include either collecting multiple consignments at a single consolidation hub or multiple pickups at various pickup points along the journey before being exported to GB. So the changes that are coming into play based on the board TOM, there will be risk-based controls for groupage loads. So low-risk products are not subject to checks at the border. Medium-risk products will have a reduced level of checks compared to current non-EU checks. House certificates for imports into GB now include inclusive and/or statements so that products that meet different conditions can be certified together onto a single export house certificate, as long as they meet all other requirements of the certificate, e.g. being dispatched by, from the same EU-approved premise. The official seal requirements are being revised so that official seals will only be required for animal products where they are mandated within the export house certificate. And as I mentioned, we'll be launching the certificate logistics pilot in January 24. And this pilot aims to reduce the cost burden associated with recertification of groupage loads prior to dispatch from an EU consolidation hub. So just the last area I'll pick up from those topics on that original slide. Further information within the border TOM covered charges and fees for SPS checks. So once border checks are introduced for consignments, they'll be subject to two types of charges. These include one for Port Health Authority and Animal Plant Health Agency charges, and those levied by border control posts. We will be introducing the common user charge, which is a flat rate levied on every SBS consignment which is eligible for BCP checks through the ports of Dover or Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, whether they are selected for a check or not. And this will be the BCP charge for those traders and consignments that are travelling across the short straits. And it's intended to recover operating costs of government-run BCP facilities which are necessary to undertake physical inspections. As you may or may not be aware, DEFRA recently consulted on the proposed common user charges, and the consultation ran for approximately 4 weeks. We invited views on methodology, indicative rates for common user charges, principles, in order that we could determine fair and reasonable charges for all businesses. So DEFRA are currently reviewing those charges, that responses of the consultation, and we'll use that feedback to inform our final policy. And you'll see a summary of the final responses published in the coming months, hopefully very soon. So just the last area I'm just going to cover. Excuse me for struggling to breathe a little bit here at the moment. So support for traders. So Tom's team is putting in a lot of effort and work to support traders to make sure they're ready for all the forthcoming milestones. Hopefully some of you will have attended or will have seen that during September the team ran a series of webinars. They were available to be booked via Eventbrite, and they were targeted at specific sectors on the key changes under the board of Tom. Now, we're currently looking at new webinars that will be rolled out over the coming months. They are already available to be booked on Eventbrite, covering key milestones and what traders need to be prepared for and what actions they need to take. So they'll be drilling down into a little bit more detail wherever possible, and give businesses and traders to ask the questions they need to move forward. Alongside that, there's going to be a range of assets produced for traders to use. These may be process flow maps, guidance products, and a whole range of things. There's also a set of maps produced in order to direct traders and businesses to where BCPs and various designations are happening around GB. So just to make things a lot easier, so you don't have to rely on lists on gov.uk pages to search for routes to take. And there is a lot of work as well from the team working with our content team on gov.uk pages to make them that little bit more user-friendly wherever possible. The other thing that will be happening, and actually what I should add to, and Tom will confirm this as well, the team are also looking wherever possible to produce EU translations of the guidance documents for top 7 exporters from EU and EFTA countries, again to help support those traders in this new regime. And the last thing just to mention is that there is also going to be a trader readiness survey run that's be sent out imminently and will be resent out over the coming months as the milestones come into play, so that we can gauge what's needed from traders and businesses in terms of support, in terms of guidance, as we produce further products going forward, whether that be webinars or guidance products. So that's all from me at the moment. We've now got a little bit of time for Q&As. As Tom mentioned, we're more in the engagement field. We'll answer any questions we can. Those we can't, we have Annika with us taking notes, and we'll feed back through ACITA with any responses we can take away for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Question. I'm told that trying to do an IPAFS declaration is quite painful with all the drop-down menus and we found that anything we ask you guys to do a presentation, which you put together here, is always sort of comprehensive. We speak to you guys, we get really comprehensive answers, but it does feel as if... I was actually looking on LinkedIn yesterday, and I saw a lady standing with the handwritten code that they'd used to sort of land the first landing on the moon, and it sort of felt that's where DEFRA is. I mean, you guys don't seem to have digital support. Is that going to change in the future? Because without that digital support, we're just not going to get there.
Yeah, a good question. And I haven't tried to do an IPAFS notification myself, but it does seem quite painful. And also we're launching the Common Health Entry documentation. So CHEDS, CHED-A, these are the more detailed version of the IMP notification that IPAFS currently runs for EU exports to GB. So we will be asking more information of traders, not less, when it comes to pre-notification. But that information is really important for biosecurity, and it's a common practice across the world. In terms of how we integrate that going forwards, single trade window will be a massive part of that. But in terms of the guidance and support that we're providing for traders, my team's looking at sort of filming walkthroughs. The key things are how to register for IPAFS and how to submit a notification. As I sort of already mentioned, we know numbers of pre-notifications among traders are pretty low. There's no enforcement of that at the moment, but it will become a really important part of that compliance approach, which will then mean that goods could be stopped at the border. So we'll be hammering home that message to drive up numbers, but we will also be providing support, webinars, run-throughs, email addresses, contact details at APHA, who have a dedicated phone line where traders can ring to get support with those pre-notifications if they need it. So hopefully it should become clearer, it should become easier. We know from experience that traders don't prepare for these things until they need to, and I think that's fair enough. That's what I would do in a busy Christmas period with a January deadline. So I think it's going to get there, but we're conscious that we need to provide as much information, make it as simple as possible for these traders.
We do have a whole lot of members that are wanting to do IPAFS declarations voluntarily, but they are just so difficult at the moment. I mean, I know a lot of guys have actually created a bot that goes in and sort of fills in the... But where's the API that we were promised? I mean, why have we not been able to connect digitally? Because if we don't do that, it is going to fall down, and is there backup? I mean, what is your sort of fallback plan? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a good question. I think that digital support and the IPAFS team are building on sort of incremental additions and things to make things slightly easier for traders, like bulk upload of pre-notifications, where you can upload all of your pre-notifications in one go into the system through an Excel spreadsheet that's easily downloadable. Those sorts of facilitations are coming online. The API, I think, is in the background on the sort of list of digital things to work through. I think with all of that in mind, the single trade window is the end goal, and it's about making sure that IPAFS, the work that we do now on IPAFS, isn't duplicated and wasted when we bring the single trade window in. So I think it's about making it as simple as possible now for traders, and I think some of those facilitations will be coming online. But if there's anything specific in terms of real difficulties that people are struggling with on IPAFS, we really want to hear that, and we want that feedback. So because we can then pass that on to the team, my team can then come out with, we can get the information to sort of make it as easy as possible and as digestible, because chances are if someone's having that issue on their end, there's many more people out there who have that same problem.
Yeah, I've got a couple of members that have sort of given specific instances, so I'll share that with you guys.
Perfect, thanks, Des.
Any questions from anyone else? There in the corner.
Hello, Robert Hardy from Iori. A couple of things. First of all, there's no API on traces, so don't get too hung up about it. It'd be nice, but it is what it is. The categories are very important. Medium, bad; low, good. Medium, potentially prohibitive on certain imports of artisanal cheeses, for example, from Italy. So when you look up on the categorization list on the website, which I've just done, and you look up Emmental, and you know low, good, medium, bad, what's the categorization in there? Medium or low? That's my question, not the answer.
Yes, and I imagine there's further clarification on that. We published the risk categorisations for EU back in April, and we've just done the rest. I think there's about 22 rest of world countries that we've risk assessed. So the EU SPS Office of Assurance has to go out and risk assess these countries. So we published those as we published the border target operating model in August. I think on the EU side, we have sort of summary tables on gov.uk which says medium or low, but there are commodity-specific look-up tools for EU exports where you can type in your tariff number and get the exact commodity categorization, so medium or low. I think it would depend on country of origin and maybe if it's processed or shelf stable. Those sorts of exceptions are the ones that we have to sort of allow some wiggle room for in those summary tables. But I think if you went into the lookup tool, the Excel document, you would find your exact commodity and then you could find the risk associated. That will come later for rest of world exports. We haven't got that yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you very much then.
Well, there's one question over here.
Sorry,
I don't know if you want to take that.
Old and blind, apologies.
Hi, it's Alice from Aldi. So you mentioned that iPass pre-notification at the moment is quite challenging for them and the numbers are quite low. With the introduction of the export health certificate coming in January, how are you going to, how is this going to be monitored and enforced if no documentary or physical checks are going to happen until April?
So documentary checks will come in from the 31st of January, and so we will be checking those pre-notifications and export health certificates, but there won't be enforcement from January. So we have a team in the central hub, it's being called, and there's a bit more information in the target operator model, but not loads. But it's something we're working on around that period in between April and between January and April. What can we do to look at non-compliance numbers, because at the moment we just don't have the data. The sort of non-compliance rates are based against HMRC's customs data versus for the commodities that will be impacted. So we don't have the data on it, but from January we will. And so we're looking at how we can educate traders through that period. Those who don't complete the export health certificate as it should be completed, we will look to sort of get to reach those people and make sure that those export health certificates are done in the way that they need to be done for April, so that those problems don't arise when we get to that end of April deadline. Similar with IPAF's notifications, we from a comms engagement point of view will be doing all we can, and I know we're working with you guys at Aldi and across the sort of food supply chain, wholesale supply chain to make sure we reach those EU exporters, but also those GB importers on the pre-notification side, particularly on those island origin goods who haven't had to pre-notify yet.
And how can they expect to get that information back? Is that going to be back through the iPath system, or will it be externally, you'll reach out to them?
I don't think we'll do it through the iPath system at the moment. It will be through comms and engagement. So it's my team, but we'll be working closely with all of you guys on that.
Have I missed anyone? Another one?
Yeah, hi, it's Alan Swan from Maersk. Yeah, question on the groupage side, and when the other colleagues talking about charges, we know in the few months we should hear details on the common user charges. Can you give us any indication on kind of what way that's going? Because it was quite a wildly fluctuating charge. It's got like £30-40 difference between them.
Yeah, I think so. The summary charge that was published in the border target operating model hasn't changed. I think it was at £43. And just to be clear, this common user charge is for government-run border control posts only. Most of them aren't government-run, and those charges will be published a bit later. I think a lot of border control posts that are privately run are waiting for government to publish our common user charges first, and then the sort of subsequent ones will follow. I think it was published at £43 for sort of those sort of medium risk ones, and low risk consignments will be at £10. But again, we're taking feedback on the consultation, and we'll publish the sort of final rates later this year. The variance, I'm not sure. I think it was based on the cost recovery that we operate as government. I think we literally divide the volume expected through those border control posts by the cost to run them, and that's how you get to that figure.
We know kind of the rationale behind it. Was there any talk or scope, thinking of groupage operators, maybe large supermarkets as well, if you have more than, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 different EHC types in groupage load, is there a cap on charges?
I don't think so, Angela. No, I don't think so. But again, more in terms of the common user charge, more that detail will be published alongside the consultation responses.
Thank you. Any more questions? Tom, Angela, thank you very much. I see a lot of faces, people that haven't been here for a while, so membership actually asked for, I suppose, for people in my age category, that in the morning we have a short comfort break. So we will break for about 10 minutes and then the action will be resumed. Thank you.